She was the daughter of unimaginable wealth, living in a mansion where every detail whispered luxury. But in one terrifying moment, that world of privilege collapsed. A single glass of juice, a sudden fainting, and the silence that followed carried more danger than anyone could see. Only one woman, a black nanny, noticed what others ignored. Her desperate cry would uncover more than poison in a cup. It would expose a truth far more dangerous, a hidden injustice lurking behind golden gates. What really happened in that mansion? In the heart of the city's wealthiest neighborhood stood a mansion so vast it seemed untouchable. Inside lived the daughter of a powerful millionaire, a young woman shielded from hardship, her life wrapped in luxury. Every corner of the house sparkled, every detail screamed perfection. And yet, beneath the polished floors and golden chandeliers, there was someone whose world couldn't have been more different. The nanny, a black woman whose quiet strength carried the household, though her presence was often overlooked. Day after day, she cared for the daughter as if she were her own, preparing meals, watching over her, keeping the rhythms of the house steady. It wasn't just work. It was a duty born out of love and responsibility. But even in the safety of that mansion, shadows lurked, whispers behind closed doors, choices made in secret. And the nanny, though silent, could sense it. She had seen enough of the world to know that danger rarely announced itself with a warning. What none of them realized was that a single afternoon, something as ordinary as a glass of juice, would push this fragile balance to the edge. And in that moment, everything the nanny had endured, everything she had been dismissed for, would collide with a truth no one was prepared to face. The mansion stood as a fortress of wealth, its marble halls echoing with laughter from parties, and the easy confidence of those who never had to question their place in the world. For the millionaire's daughter, life was effortless, gowns tailored perfection, friends who arrived in sleek cars, and a father whose influence opened every door. To the outside world, she seemed untouchable. But inside the mansion, a quiet imbalance simmered. The black nanny, loyal, watchful, and ever-present, lived in the shadows of privilege. Her job demanded invisibility, to keep the household running smoothly without ever intruding on the shine of its owners. She ate in the servants' quarters, used a separate entrance, and was often treated as though she were part of the furniture, not a human being with her own dignity. Still she stayed. She stayed because a young girl needed her, because love made her endure what pride wanted to resist. She had learned long ago that in a house built on wealth and appearances, her voice would always be the quietest in the room. Yet there were cracks beginning to form. At dinners, she noticed the daughter's friends whispering about her when she passed. A smirk here, a dismissive laugh there. Once, she overheard a cruel joke comparing her to the help they imagined she must have been descended from. The daughter said nothing, not out of malice, but out of blindness. She didn't see the pain because she had never been forced to. The nanny carried these wounds silently, folding them into her daily routine. But silence never meant ignorance. She noticed details others dismissed. The daughter's growing fatigue, her pale skin after late-night parties, the subtle unease in the air. And then came the day that changed everything. It was a gathering unlike the usual glittering soirees. This one felt smaller, more intimate, but somehow more dangerous. A handful of guests filled the grand hall, their glasses raised, their voices smooth with charm. On the surface, it was just another celebration. Yet the nanny felt a heaviness pressing against her chest. Something in the way the drinks were passed, something in the quick exchange of looks she caught, but could not explain. It all whispered of a danger invisible to those who trusted too easily. When the daughter reached for her glass, the nanny's hands trembled. She had no reason, no proof, only instinct. An instinct that kept her alive in a world where her voice was rarely believed. She watched closely, every muscle taut. Moments later, the unthinkable happened. The daughter's laughter broke mid-sentence. Her body swayed, and then she collapsed against the polished floor. Gasps filled the room, chairs scraped, voices shouted in confusion. But no one moved with urgency, no one except the nanny. Rushing forward, she knelt beside the girl, her pulse racing. She checked her breathing, her skin clammy and cold. Around her, the wealthy guests hesitated, as though waiting for someone else to act. Some even stepped back, unwilling to touch the scene. And then she saw it. The half-empty glass, the faint residue at its rim. A chill ran through her spine. She knew what this meant. Poison. Her heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the knowledge of what would come next. If she spoke, would they believe her? Or would they dismiss her, as they always had? Because of the color of her skin? Would they accuse her instead, the servant in the room, the one whose presence had always been questioned? She opened her mouth, but hesitation gripped her. The stakes weren't just the daughter's life. They were her own. One word could save the girl, but it could also condemn her. Seconds stretched into eternity. The guests muttered, their confusion turning sharp. Someone whispered, "She's not breathing right," while another barked an order for someone to call a doctor. Still, no one addressed the glass. No one questioned what caused collapse. They were blind to the danger, or perhaps unwilling to see it. And then came the breaking point. The nanny thought of all the times she had swallowed her truth, all the moments she had endured humiliation in silence. She thought of the girl she had raised, cared for, and protected through every scraped knee and midnight fever. She thought of injustice, not abstract, not distant, but standing in that room, choking the air from a young woman who had never known its weight. Her voice tore through the hall, raw and urgent. She cried out the warning that shattered the illusion of safety. The juice was poisoned. Gas erupted. Faces twisted in shock. Some guests recoiled, others froze, and for a fleeting second, the room turned its eyes on her, not with gratitude, but with suspicion. The weight of centuries pressed against her chest as she realized what her cry had unleashed. Questions flew, sharp and accusing. How did she know? Why was she the one to notice? Whispers turned venomous, doubts swirling like smoke. Instead of seeing her as a savior, they saw her as a threat. And in that moment, the true danger revealed itself. It wasn't only the poison in the glass. It was a poison of prejudice, dripping into every judgment, every glance cast her way. She had tried to save a life, yet she knew the battle had only begun, because in this mansion, under chandeliers of gold, the truth was not always welcome, and the nanny was about to learn just how dangerous speaking it could be. The room, once filled with laughter and music, had turned into a battlefield of suspicion. The daughter lay unconscious, her chest rising faintly, every breath shallow, fragile. And yet, instead of rushing to save her, eyes turned on the nanny, sharp, cold, and accusing. "How do you know it was poison?" someone demanded. The words weren't curious. They were laced with venom. In their minds, the servant had no right to speak with certainty. Her cry had pierced through their privilege, and now they needed someone to blame. The nanny's heart raced. She wanted to scream the truth, that she had seen things they never noticed, that her instincts were born from years of surviving in a world that didn't believe her. But the weight of their stares was crushing. She felt centuries of prejudice pressing down, reminding her that people like her were too often silenced, too often branded guilty before their story was even heard. Still, she stood her ground. She pointed toward the glass, the faint trace of residue at its edge, her trembling hand evidence of both fear and courage. Yet the more she insisted, the more their whispers grew. Suspicion hardened into accusation. One guest muttered about convenient timing. Another sneered, suggesting she had always been too close to the family. And then, as if on cue, someone spoke the word she dreaded most. Maybe she did it. The air cracked with the accusation. Heads turned. The nanny's throat tightened. Her legs felt weak, but she refused to collapse. She could not, because lying on the floor was a young woman she had raised, the child she had fed, bathed, and sung to sleep. If she broke now, both of them would be lost. But the tide was against her. A man rushed to the daughter's side, called for the butler, the doctor, anyone but the nanny. She was pushed aside, her hands slapped away as though her touch were contamination. The very love that had fueled her cry for help was twisted into suspicion, her loyalty recast as betrayal. She stood alone in the grand hall, surrounded by chandeliers and golden frames, yet treated as if she were invisible, or worse, a threat. Her voice trembled, but it did not break. She cried out again, insisting the glass be tested, that someone listen. But her words were drowned in the chaos, swallowed by disbelief and prejudice. And then came the sharpest wound of all. The millionaire himself entered the room, his face etched with fury and fear. His daughter was pale, limp in the arms of her friends, and his eyes, once softened by trust in the nanny, were hardened now by suspicion. He demanded answers. He wanted someone to blame. And she, standing in her plain uniform, with skin that marked her as other, became the easiest target. Her voice cracked as she begged him to believe her. She reminded him of the years she had devoted to his family, the sacrifices she had made. But doubt had already poisoned his mind as surely as the drink had poisoned his daughter. He looked at her not as the woman who had helped raise his child, but as a servant who had overstepped, as a threat who dared to speak truth in a room built on lies. The nanny's chest tightened. Fear clawed at her, but beneath it was a fire that refused to go out. She realized that no matter how much she had given, no matter how much she had loved, her place in this house was always fragile, always conditional. And now, in the moment that mattered most, the truth she carried was being buried under centuries of prejudice. The daughter's life hung in the balance, and so did hers. For in that room, surrounded by wealth and power, the greatest danger was not the poison in the glass. It was a poison of injustice that tainted every judgment. As the millionaire's gaze locked on her, cold and unyielding, the question was no longer whether the daughter would survive. The question was whether the nanny herself would make out alive, whether her truth would be erased, or whether it would finally shatter the silence. The mansion did not fall silent after the nanny's cry. It exploded with voices, accusations, and panic. Yet amid the chaos, something undeniable happened. The daughter's pulse grew weaker, her lips pale, her breathing faint. A doctor finally arrived, summoned in frantic whispers, and when he examined the glass, his face stiffened. Quietly, reluctantly, he confirmed what the nanny had shouted all along. The drink was poisoned. The truth was undeniable. The girl had been saved not by the wealth surrounding her, not by the glittering guests frozen in fear, but by the voice they had tried to silence, by the woman they doubted, by the black nanny who had risked everything to speak. And yet, even with the truth exposed, the wound of injustice lingered, for while the daughter recovered, slowly brought back from the brink, the nanny was left marked by suspicion, her loyalty stained by the very act of courage that had saved a life. No apology could erase the looks, the whispers, the accusations that had cut so deeply. The poison in the glass could be removed, but the poison in people's hearts was harder to cleanse. In the days that followed, the incident was whispered about but never truly confronted. The millionaire, eager to protect his family's image, downplayed what had happened. The guests avoided questions. The world beyond the gates would never know how close the daughter came to death, or how prejudice nearly cost her life. But the nanny knew, and she carried that truth heavy as stone. She had seen what others refused to see, that in a world of wealth and power, her voice was still treated as disposable. She had saved the daughter, yet she walked away knowing that if not for undeniable evidence, she might have been destroyed by the very people she protected. This was more than one night in one mansion. It was a reflection of something larger, something deeper. How many times had voices like hers been ignored? How many lives have been lost, not because the warning wasn't given, but because it came from someone society refused to believe? That night became a mirror of a painful truth. Racism doesn't only appear in open cruelty or violent acts. It thrives in doubt, in the reflexive suspicion, in the way people choose to see guilt before innocence when the skin is black. It thrives in the silence of those who should speak, in the comfort of those who look away. The nanny's cry may have saved one life, but it revealed something chilling, that sometimes the deadliest poison is not in a glass, it's in the way people see each other. And so the question lingers, not just in that mansion, but in every community, every street, every workplace. How many more warnings will go unheard? How many more lives will hang in the balance before society chooses to listen to the voices it has silenced for too long? Because in the end, this story is not only about a poison drink. It is about a poison system, a system that demands courage from those who have already endured enough, while excusing the blindness of those who should know better. She was just one woman, overlooked and underestimated. But her voice, her cry, pierced through centuries of silence. And though the mansion may try to forget, we cannot. We must not. So the next time you hear a voice that others dismiss, ask yourself, will you ignore it? Or will you listen before it's too late?